Chapter 301. Dom was enraged by those words. The Shandon family were highly esteemed in Zealand and had never been humiliated like this before. However, he knew that people like him were not to be messed with, for they had great local influence and were even more powerful than others in their own locality. Dom took a deep breath and held back his anger. "How should I address you?" "The name's Lee Shorson. You can ask others about me if you have a problem with me." Lee laughed wildly. Dom replied, "Mr. Shorson, the Shandon family is quite a big name in Zealand as well. We'll be sure to give you a big gift once we're done. Why don't we do that instead?" Lee barked out a cold laugh. "Do I look like I need your gifts? Also, this is Sendinville. Don't bother bringing Zealand up. Like I've said, Sammy stays and everyone else can piss off. If you insist on going against me, I'll be sure to beat you into submission." Lee did not seem to respect Dom in the slightest. His expression was nothing but condescending. Dom flared up in anger at once. What was wrong with this guy? Just then, Wilbur got to his feet all of a sudden. He grabbed Lee by the hair, slamming his head harshly against the table. Lee was in a daze from the gesture, and before he knew it, Wilbur had slapped Lee across the face and aimed another punch at his nose. Lee was spinning after this. Wilbur released his grasp and Lee swayed before collapsing to the floor. This made his men cry out in shock, and they yelled as they rushed over. In just a blink of an eye, all of them were groaning in pain on the ground. Wilbur dusted off his hands. "Sheesh. I can't even eat in peace. Let's go." Dom hurried to nod, and the four of them got out to leave the hotel and head into the mountains. Wilbur and the rest were long gone when Lee and his men finally returned to their senses. Lee's vision spun as he struggled to recount what just happened. Moments later, he came to his senses and flared up in anger at once, whipping out his phone to make a call. Once the call was connected, he screamed into the receiver like a madman, "Jibby, get me a team of Special Forces officers." "What's the matter, Mr. Shorson?" "I've been beaten up. I'm going to have their heads." "I don't think that's a good idea, Mr. Shorson. How about we just let the police handle this?" "Are you turning me down? I'll have you fucking fired this very second." "No, please." "All right. I'll be right there, Mr. Shorson. Remember, they have to be from the Special Forces." "Got it." Lee hung up the call and shouted wildly, "Just you fucking wait. I'll make sure you regret this." At the same time, Wilbur and the others had gone deep into the mountains. In the car, Wilbur glanced at Moose. "What's your master's name? And what cultivation method does he practice? What on earth does he need so many bodies for? You'd better tell the truth or you're going to get it." Moose sighed. "My master's name is Darlene Chancelot. She's from the ancient witch tribe that practices witchcraft. I really don't know why she needs all those dead bodies. We just send them to her every month, and she'll let us live." "Is there anything else I need to know?" Wilbur said calmly. Moose shook his head. "That's all I know myself." "Oh, my master lives in a pretty strange place." "How strange is it?" "I can't describe it. But every time I go back, something about the village changes. I just can't quite put my finger on it." Chapter 302. Wilbur fell silent. Those words terrified Sammy, and she glanced at Wilbur. "Sir, I'm a little scared." Don't worry. I'm just thinking whether I should get rid of them or not. Do you really think I wouldn't be able to beat his master?" Wilbur knew exactly what Sammy was worried about. Sammy flushed awkwardly and bit her lip. "That's not what I meant. I'm just telling you there's no need to worry. I can still handle this much," Wilbur said calmly. Moose seemed to have made up his mind then, turning to Wilbur. "Sir, if you really do beat my master, can you also have her break my curse? I can't take it anymore." Wilbur looked straight at Moose. "I can, but only if you swear to change for the better. I'll serve you for the rest of my life if you can get my master to break my curse. Please, I'd be a laughingstock if I took a crook like you in." Moose lowered his head in embarrassment. It was true that what he did was less than savory. Wilbur said nothing more, and the rest of the journey was silent. After a morning of driving, the car finally stopped where the roads were cut off, and everyone had no choice but to get down and walk. Dom was carrying Sammy on his back, but his strength was clearly lacking. Wilbur saw this and took Sammy from her, continuing ahead at the same speed. Sammy's face was flushed, but she was wearing a blissful smile. Dom saw this, and his gaze flashed with something unreadable. Over an hour later, they finally arrived at a village. The village consisted of over 200 houses constructed of bamboo. It was located right in front of a hill and made for a stunning view. It was, however, in the middle of nowhere. Who knew how these villagers survived? Just then, Moose pointed at the tallest 3-story bamboo house. "That's where my master lives. But we're usually not allowed inside." "Aren't the other villagers scared when you send those bodies over?" Wilbur asked. Moose shook his head. "Perhaps they have gotten used to it." "How long have you been a pupil of your master? And how long have you been bringing bodies to her?" "I was sent here at a very young age but cultivated with my fellow cultivators in the back of the mountain. Master never let us come here, and I only got in touch with the people in the village after I graduated." "It's strange, though. They've never spoken to me," Moose said. That was indeed quite strange. However, Wilbur could not be bothered and said, "Let's go see your master." "Sir, I'm afraid I might not come out alive if I just take you over like this," Moose said in terror. Wilbur gave it some thought. "Well, you can stay here then. We'll go on our own." They had found the place already, and Moose was not important anymore. Moose's mind raced, and he gritted his teeth. "You know, I've got no way out of this anyway. I'll go with you." Moose understood that he would be as good as dead if Wilbur were to lose to his master, and there was actually a better shot going with Wilbur instead. Moose would be free if Wilbur won. Wilbur chuckled. "Come along then." They walked into the village. Sammy was still on Wilbur's back, and she trembled upon sensing a creepy aura wash over her. "This feels kinda weird," Dom frowned. Wilbur said, "It's already noon but there's no one in sight. It is weird." Just then, an old woman walked out of the 3-story bamboo house. Her back was completely hunched over, and she had long white hair that was practically touching the ground. She hobbled over using the cane in her grasp as she approached Wilbur and the rest. Chapter 303. "Moose, are you bringing live sacrifices here this time?" The old woman raised her head, revealing a face that seemed completely devoid of moisture and life. Sammy gasped in terror. She was scared out of her wits. Moose trembled from head to toe, bowing to the old woman. "Master, these people threatened me. I had no choice." Wilbur put Sammy down, letting Dom hold her up as he chuckled at Moose. "Come on, you traitorous bastard." Moose flushed, not daring to say another word. Wilbur turned to look at the old woman. "Are you Darlene Chancellor?" "That I am. Moose seems pretty afraid of you." "That's rather impressive, young man," Darlene rasped. Dom and Sammy were both surprised this time. Neither of them had expected Moose's terrible, evil master to be an old woman. This old woman also looked like she was 1 foot into the grave, but turned out to be a cultivator instead, the kind that needed countless dead bodies to practice her cultivation. No one would have believed it if they had not seen it. Wilbur merely smiled. "Sure. I'm just here for one thing." He took out the necklace, holding it up to Darlene. "Break the curse in this necklace and denounce yourself from cultivating. I'll spare your life if you do that." "Ha ha ha ha!" Darlene burst out laughing, her wrinkled body shaking as she heaved for air. "I admire your courage, young man. I was looking for a corpse just like yours to be the leader here anyway. It'll be your honor. Moose has done well this time," Darlene said between gasps. Wilbur's expression darkened. "I guess we're not doing this the easy way then," Darlene said. "I haven't had any live people in this village of mine for years. I can't believe the first one to come by would be so cocky. Doesn't my name mean anything anymore these days? Your name's about as powerful as the size of this village. Have you ever left this village at all?" Wilbur mocked. Darlene's expression darkened at once. "How dare you disrespect your elders like this? Let's see how cocky you can get after I bury you into the ground." "I'd like to see for myself what the witch tribe can do," Wilbur said calmly. Darlene flared up with anger, banging the cane in her hand against the ground. A force rose from the ground to surround her, spreading through the entire village. The entire place seemed to quake as countless people began emerging from the bamboo houses in the village. There were several hundred of them in sight in no time, completely surrounding Wilbur and the rest. Darlene smirked. "No one leaves my village alive." "I don't believe you," Wilbur said lightly. Darlene was all the more enraged. She waved her cane, and a woman rushed over to pounce on Wilbur. Wilbur summoned his thundercleaver, sneering coldly. "I knew none of these people were actually human." As he spoke, the woman arrived by Wilbur's side and reached out her arms to grab him. Her fingers were splayed wide, revealing her long fingernails that emitted a green fog. It was clear they were poisonous. Wilbur sneered, wielding his thundercleaver. The blade of the cleaver came swinging down, slicing the woman cleanly in half. Just then, the two halves of the woman exploded with a loud bang into countless pieces. The blood turned into a green fog, spreading in Wilbur's direction. Wilbur's expression darkened. A burst of light exploded from the spirit energy on his thundercleaver, sending the poisonous fog away. The fog drifted upward into the sky. Chapter 304. Darlene chuckled. "How many of them do you think you can fend off?" She whipped her cane, and hundreds of bodies came charging towards Wilbur with a force that was enough to completely overrun him. Sammy cried out in shock, and Dom's face paled. Moose did not know what to do either. Wilbur formed several seals with one hand in their direction, and a barrier rose around them that blocked the rest of the villagers off. He wielded his thunder cleaver and began attacking those zombies. Upon killing that one zombie from just earlier, Wilbur had understood something. Darlene had wanted all those dead bodies to turn them into zombies. Everyone in this village was a zombie. These zombies looked just like regular people but were no longer living and only operated under Darlene's command. These charmed zombies were not only stronger than regular human beings but also had a large amount of poison stored in their bodies. They did not fear death or pain in the slightest, making them perfect fighting machines that regular people could do nothing about. Even an army would find it hard to kill them without any weapons of mass destruction. However, it seemed like Darlene's zombifying attempts were not always successful. Otherwise, Moose and the other cultivators would not have to bring so many bodies over every month. Wilbur was a strong fighter nevertheless, and his combat skills were top tier. Despite the zombies flocking toward him, Wilbur and his thunder cleaver darted through the crowd. Not one zombie was able to get too close before they were slaughtered. However, the zombies would explode automatically after being slain and let out poisonous fog. Within minutes, the fog had spread to around 100-meter radius of the battleground. A regular human being would die from just one breath of the fog, and even an ambience-level cultivator would be poisoned from breathing it in for a prolonged time before eventually dying. That was what Darlene relied on. She did not even need to attack herself before these zombies killed her enemies for her. What she did not know, however, was that Wilbur was practicing the dragon's cultivation method. The dragon tribe had been the strongest tribe since a long time ago, almost immune to many fatal things. Thus, Wilbur did not care about the fog in the slightest. As he whipped his cleaver about in battle, countless zombies collapsed to the ground, exploding into pieces. The poisonous fog grew thicker and thicker, enveloping the entire village. The zombies continued to howl and shriek, pouncing on Wilbur one after the other. Darlene stared ahead at the thick poisonous fog, and a smile slowly spreading across her wrinkled face. She was certain that even an ambience-level cultivator would not be able to survive under the attack of so many zombies and the thick poison fog in the air. Despite knowing that the zombies were decreasing in number, Darlene did not feel like it was a shame. In fact, she only grew more excited. Wilbur being so powerful was something that excited Darlene. Once she had killed him, she would be able to make a super zombie out of him that was more powerful than all the zombies she had forged before combined. She would finally have an expert fighting under her. It was important to note that upon Darlene's zombification, an ambience-level cultivator would be able to reach sanctuary level once they have turned. Chapter 305. There were only so many sanctuary-level cultivators in the world. That thought made Darlene smile widen even more. Amidst the thick poisonous fog, Wilbur whipped his cleaver calmly as the blade exploded with powerful spirit energy, taking out one zombie with each blow. He hardly paid any mind to the poisonous fog that came forth, continuing on his massacre. As the battle went on, The expression on Darlene started changing slowly. Most of the zombies were slain, but Wilbur did not seem to be letting up in the slightest. He did not seem to be poisoned or weakened at all. Darlene was a little confused. Even an ambience-level cultivator would not be able to take on the combined attack of this many zombies, let alone with the addition of the poisonous fog. Wilbur looked up at the air filled with the fog. He noticed that not many zombies were left. He let out a sneer, and the dragon's crystal in his body spun as a terrifying spirit energy surged out into his thunder cleaver. He let out a loud cry, raising the cleaver and tugging it hard. A ball of light made the blade of the cleaver glow, letting out a deafening sound. Terrifying energy was being forged. Even the zombies with no sentience were confused by that, slowing down slightly. The powerful force caused the deepest part of their soul to feel a twinge of fear. Just then, Wilbur let out a loud cry as countless lightning bolts shot out from the thunder cleaver in all directions. The remaining zombies were disintegrated by the lightning bolts one after another, with the poisonous fog exploding from their bodies sent into the air. Wilbur was not done yet. He raised the cleaver once more, crackling with lightning into the sky. It was as if there were a show of breathtaking fireworks. The poisonous fog was finally displaced by the lightning storm, leaving nothing behind. Wilbur wielded his thunder cleaver and looked at Darlene with a smile. "Got anything else, you old witch?" Darlene stared at Wilbur in disbelief. He had just used his dragon crystal to channel a terrifying amount of spirit energy, summoning his thunder powers to cause the shower of lightning strikes that completely wiped out the zombies and their poisonous fog. He was only doing this because he did not want the fog to spread and cause harm to the nearby villagers. Darlene was completely shocked. She lowered her head quietly. "I spent decades forging these zombies, young man. You've ruined all my hard work. Do you know that?" Darlene looked up, glowering at Wilbur as if she wanted nothing more than to eat him alive. Wilbur scoffed. "The evil you've done deserves a fate 100 times worse than this. I killed all these zombies so they would be able to rest in peace." "Ha ha ha ha!" Darlene let out a bone-chilling string of laughter. "I'll admit you're rather powerful, but you're not powerful enough. I told you. No one walks out of my village alive." Darlene made a series of gestures after that, muttering something as powerful spirit energy spread out from her body and enveloped the entire village. At the same time, the pieces of the zombie corpses all around gathered up to form a giant zombie over 20 meters tall and 7 meters wide. The giant zombie had been completely forged from the exploded corpses with their limbs and organs stuck together haphazardly, making it a terrifying sight to behold. Chapter 306. The giant zombie radiated with terrifying spirit energy, and a green fog drifted around it as it let out an earth-shaking howl. The sight made Sammy, who was in the barrier, burst into tears of terror at once. Dom's legs wobbled as he held his sister tightly to keep the both of them on their feet. Dom was pale in the face as well. It was clear he had never seen something quite this terrifying before. Wilbur's expression finally turned solemn this time. He had really underestimated this old witch. She was about as powerful as an intermediate sanctuary-level cultivator. It was important to note that forming a live giant zombie of this size required a staggering amount of spirit energy, and anyone below sanctuary level would never be able to do it. Just then, Darlene's chest heaved as she fumed. "You're going to die, young man. You'll never beat my giant zombie." It was clear from the look on her face that forming the giant zombie had completely drained her of her spirit energy. Just then, the giant zombie was making its way toward Wilbur. Every step it took formed a deep crater on the ground, causing the earth to tremble as well. A giant zombie this big was enough to make someone pass out with terror from just one glance. Even an ambience-level cultivator would lose their bravado coming up against a beast this terrifying. Yet Wilbur merely scoffed as he tightened his grip on his thunder cleaver. The dragon crystal in his body spun again, exploding with a powerful spirit energy that coated the blade of the thunder cleaver with a spirit flame. Wilbur did not back down in the slightest. He let out a loud cry as he whipped the cleaver through the air and brought it down against the head of the giant zombie. Sammy, Dom, and Moose were filled with terror then, watching as Wilbur fought on. They knew that Wilbur was powerful, but it was understandable that they were doubtful of him winning against a beast like that. It was important to note that once Wilbur lost, Sammy and the rest would become the next batch of zombies. They did not even dare to imagine just how much they were going to suffer then. Just as Wilbur attacked, the giant zombie let out a low groan and threw a punch. The giant's fist was about 8 meters wide, radiating with poison and spirit energy. Nevertheless, the attack was deflected by Wilbur, with the blade of his thunder cleaver colliding with the giant zombie's fist. Both forces collided as the cleaver left a deep gash on the giant zombie's fist, and Wilbur was sent backward from the tremendous force as well. He stared at the howling giant zombie, bravado and gusto growing in his chest as he let out a howl. Spirit flames lit up around his body at once as he wielded his cleaver, charging toward the giant zombie. Wilbur was so fast that it was nearly impossible to see him with the naked eye. He zipped around the giant zombie in circles, landing blow after blow. Each of his attacks would form a huge, deep, charred gash on the giant's body. However, the giant zombie did not seem to feel anything, hardly affected by the wounds at all. It continued to swing its fists at Wilbur, but Wilbur was moving at a speed that made it impossible for the punches to land. Yet as the giant zombie swung over and over again, the air around it began to constrict as Wilbur was slowed down by the energy radiating out from the giant zombie. Wilbur could not get used to the restriction in time and slowed to a halt. The giant zombie opened his huge palms, sweeping them over in Wilbur's direction. An overwhelming force came Wilbur's way. Sammy, Dom, and Moose paled in terror at the sight, their hearts dropping to their stomachs. Chapter 307. The giant zombie was able to make the air between its palms constrict from its previous attacks, radiating a strength that was impossible to resist. Any regular human being would find it hard to withstand such pressure, and any slip-up on their end would result in a fatal ending. This move was enough to make up for the giant zombie's huge, lumbering figure and slow movements. Just then, as its palms were slowly closing in together, it seemed like no living thing would be able to survive such a blow. The thunder cleaver was gone from Wilbur's grasp. He held his palms up, trying to deflect the giant's terrifying blow. The palms closed together at last, with Wilbur right in the center. Sammy and the rest were scared out of their wits, closing their eyes hopelessly as dread washed over them. They could only imagine what the witch was going to do to them. Just then, Darlene let out a bone-chilling peal of laughter as she hobbled over to the giant zombie slowly on her cane. The giant zombie will never be beaten. It has all my spirit energy and that of the zombies I spent decades forging. You fool! Did you think you could beat me just because you were a sanctuary-level cultivator? Right on cue, a bright, airy dragon's howl emitted from the giant zombie's closed palms. It turns out that Wilbur had activated his dragon power right before the giant zombie's palms closed up. The dragon mark on his back glowed, lighting up his body with a red glow as well. Wilbur was using his dragon energy to hold the giant zombie's palms apart. It was just that the giant zombie was too large, making it look like Wilbur had been flattened. As the dragon's chant rang through the air, Wilbur separated his hands from each other. The giant zombie's palms were separated as well, showing Wilbur's figure. Sammy and the rest were shocked out of their wits, especially Darlene. She could hardly believe that someone could actually endure the giant zombie's blow. Just then, Wilbur let out a howl into the heavens. The red glow on his body turned blindingly bright as terrifyingly powerful energy completely pushed the giant zombie's palms apart. Wilbur took out his thunder cleaver again, which was now glowing red with dragon power on top of the sparks of lightning. If the thunder cleaver was already powerful before this, it had practically transformed into a lethal weapon out for blood now. Wilbur whipped the thunder cleaver in the air, zipping around the giant zombie in circles like a bolt of lightning. A tremendous force of thunder energy radiated from the thunder cleaver, forming 20 blade shadows over 50 meters long that sliced right through the giant zombie's body. The giant zombie let out a howl as Wilbur finally stopped moving. Its enormous body collapsed to the ground, breaking into countless pieces that rolled everywhere. The giant zombie was completely decimated just like that, and Darlene did not have the spirit energy to put it back together anymore. Sammy and the rest let out a long breath, looking at Wilbur in awe. Darlene was in a daze. The hard work she had spent decades on had been completely destroyed. Just like that. Her frail, hunched-over figure began to tremble as her cloudy pupils lit ablaze with fury. Chapter 308. Wilbur, on the other hand, was completely calm as he slung his thunder cleaver over one shoulder and called out to Darlene, "Got anything else, you old witch? I'll be taking care of you if the answer is no." Darlene gritted her teeth. "Why must you kill me? You forged a bunch of zombies and put random people under curses, including your own pupils. Isn't that enough of a reason?" Wilbur replied sharply. Darlene said, "I just made them bring dead bodies to me. I never told them to kill anyone. Besides, shouldn't they repay me for teaching them cultivation? They should repay you as your pupils, but not because you threaten them. The witchcraft you cultivate is nothing but evil. You just need dead bodies now, but you might need live human beings once you've grown more powerful," Wilbur said coldly. Darlene was at a loss for words. Wilbur was right. She had already been planning to get a few cultivators to experiment on as her zombie forging skills improved. That was because cultivators were much more powerful than regular human beings and would make way stronger zombies. Seeing Darlene say nothing made Wilbur frown. "But despite your evil ways, I don't wish to kill you. Free these people from their curses, and I'll simply rid you of your powers so you may still spend the rest of your life in peace." "Absolutely not," Darlene snarled. "I spent all my life cultivating. I'd rather you kill me than rid me of my powers." Wilbur's voice was cold. "Well, you can choose between dying and having no powers then. I choose to take you down with me." Darlene's expression turned venomous, and she began to mumble a string of indecipherable chants as she raised her cane. At the same time, a gray wisp of spirit energy emerged from her body before entering her cane. Her already wrinkled body shrank even more. Wilbur frowned. What was this old hag trying to do? She hardly had any powers left. He did not think there was much she was capable of and opened his iris veritas. Just then, Moose shouted from the barrier, "Sir, she's going to cast her most powerful spell and kill you as she dies. Be careful." Sammy and Dom's faces paled. The barrier had cut the three of them off from the outside world completely, and Wilbur could not hear Moose at all. Yet upon activating the iris veritas, Wilbur realized at once that Darlene was sacrificing her own life and spirit to cast a powerful spell. That was no small feat and might even be immediately fatal. Upon realizing this, the dragon crystal in Wilbur's body began to spin at top speed. Darlene's body was about the size of a toddler's, drained of blood, and her face was white as a sheet. Her cane, however, let out a fog so thick it was almost palpable. An ominous wave filled with danger and death came toward Wilbur. Just then, Darlene spat out her final mouthful of spirit energy and blood onto her cane. The fog coming out began to ripple in a terrifying manner. "You're dead, young man," Darlene rasped. Soul Massacre. Chapter 309. At the same time, she used the last of her energy to wave her cane at Wilbur. The gray fog on the cane turned into a ghostly shadow, baring its fangs as it pounced on Wilbur. The village seemed to be enveloped in an aura of death as the ghost appeared, causing all the plants around to wilt and die. Wilbur, the target of the Soul Massacre, was bearing the worst of this aura. He understood then that it would be hard for him to withstand the Soul Massacre even if he were to double his powers. After all, this witch with sanctuary-level powers was sacrificing her own spirit and life to cast her most powerful spell. Strength alone was not going to be enough to beat it. Dom and Sammy stared at the village turning into hell on earth in real time, their souls quaking in fear. Moose was pale with terror as well. He knew that his master had such a powerful spell that would kill anyone who was its target, but had not expected it to be this bone-chilling. Darlene held herself up with her cane, a vile smile appearing on her face as she giggled. Yet just then, Wilbur put away all his powers as a colorful halo appeared around him that enveloped him completely. The gigantic ghostly shadow collided against the halo and disappeared the next second without a sound. Darlene was at a loss for words. She could not believe that the killing spell that she had sacrificed her life and spirit for had failed. Anyone hit with the spell would be usurped by the ghost, having their soul and spirit destroyed completely. How did it turn out like this instead? Wilbur's feet were 3 feet off the ground then, hovering in midair with his hands behind his back as he stared coldly at Darlene from within the halo. Upon realizing that all of his energy would not be enough to go against the spell, Wilbur activated the dragon's safe haven. That was the power he had just traded for himself at the dragon's altar. The power could be used once every day and for a minute every time. Wilbur would be immune to all harm, but he would not be able to move for a whole minute. Just like that, the dragon's safe haven protected Wilbur completely from Darlene's spell, rendering her attempt to drag him down with her a complete failure. Darlene stared ahead in fury, taking in the sight of a very much still alive Wilbur. Alas, her life was finally drained now, and she slowly collapsed in a fit of resentment. Darlene had even sacrificed her spirit for the spell, and her presence was entirely wiped from the world without a trace. A minute passed in no time, and the dragon's safe haven vanished as Wilbur regained the ability to move. He let out a sigh. It had to be said that the old hag really was powerful. Had it not been for his new power, Wilbur would have been a gone case. He took off the barrier, so Sammy and the rest were able to move once again as well. They hurried up to Wilbur, looking at him in awe and respect. Moose could hardly contain his glee. "Sir, I think my curse got lifted." "Yes, your curse was not too severe, so of course it would be broken once the person who cursed you died," said Wilbur. "I'm finally free," Moose said tearfully, bowing profusely toward Wilbur. Just then, Sammy said, "Sir, my curse should be lifted as well, right?"